We've got a great show here. I'm Johnny Freeborn, your host, and this is Central Valley Business. Up next, I have... I didn't get your name.
Rick Horowitz.
Rick Horowitz. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I was lost in the cloud of information and details here. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You are a lawyer.
Right. Criminal defense.
Criminal defense. Tell me about what you do.
Well, I do, as a criminal defense lawyer, I do a variety of different things. You had a guest on earlier who has a marijuana delivery service for medical marijuana patients. I also do marijuana defense. Early on, when they started trying to do a lot of this stuff, I noticed that there weren't a lot of criminal defense lawyers who had focused on marijuana law. So I kind of took a little bit of a focus on that. But it's not the only thing I do. And in fact, one of my favorite stories of a case that I had involving marijuana law was an individual who hired me and then for months was angry at me because he said I wasn't doing a marijuana defense. And I explained to him, well, I'm a criminal defense lawyer, and so I'm exercising all the possible challenges that we can utilize, including we started off by doing a suppression motion on the evidence. As it turned out, we won on that point. And as we were leaving the courtroom, I turned to him and I said, are you still mad at me that I didn't do a marijuana defense? And he said, no, you're the best attorney ever. I said, well, I'm glad to hear that you think that.
So when you say marijuana defense, what do you mean by that?
Well, notwithstanding the fact that medical marijuana for qualified patients has been legal in California for quite some time, as your other guest noted, law enforcement doesn't like it. And the other factor is that a lot of people have been confused in the past. Doctors, for example, who recommend medical marijuana to their patients sometimes write recommendations that people become confused and they think they're permits, for example, to grow a certain amount of marijuana. And these recommendations will frequently say things like you can grow up to 99 plants. Well, that's never been true. You can't grow up to 99 plants. And doctors are to be excused for thinking that you can because they're not lawyers. But also because they're not lawyers, I sometimes wish they wouldn't tell patients how much they can grow.
Where do they get that idea, the 99 plant idea?
I'm not positive about that, but I normally practice state law, but I have heard that in the federal courts there are different levels of punishment based upon how many plants you're growing. So that if you're growing 100 or more, it's going to be a more serious punishment than if you're growing 99 or less, or I should say fewer. But at any rate, that's where I believe it came from. But the actual law in California under the Compassionate Use Act has always said that you're allowed to have the amount of marijuana that's reasonably necessary to treat your condition. So nobody knows exactly what that is, but in most cases it's not going to be 99 plants. Because 99 plants is going to yield way more marijuana than an ordinary patient could consume in years. And since you're not allowed to sell it, there's a case out of San Diego, I believe it was, that indicated that, among other things, you could factor in stuff like the number of plants that a person possesses in order to determine that they were illegally intending to sell the marijuana. So that's one of the problems we've had with law enforcement wanting to come in and then arrest people. And a lot of times the other problem is people think they have a marijuana card, a medical marijuana card. Well, there is a card that was promoted as part of the Medical Marijuana Program Act that was passed by the legislature and took effect in January of 2004. That's issued by the county health departments. And you can go there and you can get one of those, and presumably, at least under the law, if you have that card, then you're immune from arrest as long as you're doing normal medical marijuana sanctioned activities. Now, if the police believe that you obtained that card fraudulently, that's supposed to be the only reason they can arrest you. They'll arrest you anyway, but at least that provides a pretty good defense in court. unfortunately, what a lot of people have that they think is the card is the recommendation they got from their doctor that gets printed up in card form and given to them. That recommendation, law enforcement looks at that like it's virtually useless.
Interesting.
And they will arrest in most cases, regardless. Now, not always. Different law enforcement agencies and even different officers sometimes will approach it a little bit differently. But the bottom line on it is that that card isn't really a card. It's a recommendation that's been made into a card form. The actual card you have to get from the county health department.
Oh, wow.
So
there's more to the story than most people realize.
There's more to the story. The laws on marijuana, and I think
very tricky.
Yeah, it is, and I think the AUMA is going to confound things a little bit more. Your prior guest and I were actually talking briefly as he was leaving, and I didn't catch his name, but as he was leaving, we were talking, and I was saying to him, I'm interested to see what the Adult Use of Marijuana Act is going to do for medical marijuana patients, because previously the Compassionate Use Act, as I've already said, indicated that you can have the amount of marijuana that's reasonably necessary for the treatment of your ailment. Mm-hmm. And then in 2003, when they were debating the Medical Marijuana Program Act, which passed and became effective in January of 2004, the legislature tried to put limits and actually said, well, if you have this number of plants, 6 plants, you're going to be good, or you can have this amount of processed marijuana and so on. And in 2010, the court struck that down in a case called People v. Kelly, because they said, well, the problem is that the Medical Marijuana Program Act, being passed by the legislature, could not modify what the Compassionate Use Act passed by the voters said, because in order to modify that, they had to have they had to meet certain requirements under the California Constitution that they could not meet.
I see.
And so that portion of the Medical Marijuana Program Act was struck down, and we're remaining with the law saying that you can have the amount that's reasonably necessary for your ailment. But now we have the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. That the AUMA is another voter initiative,
which is Prop 64,
right?
For anyone that doesn't know the AUMA.
And so Prop 64 or the AUMA, that can modify the Compassionate Use Act. I'm just not sure whether or not it actually has yet. I haven't really looked at that closely. I know a local attorney named Brenda Linder who probably has. Probably I should give her a call so that we can talk about it. And I also need to take a look at it myself, because again, my concern is primarily with the criminal law aspect of it.
Right.
I don't deal with things like dispensaries or collectives, or how to set them up, anything like that, unless they get into trouble, and then they give me a call.
I see. What are some of the other bogus laws that you deal with as a criminal defense lawyer?
Bogus laws. Well, that's an interesting
we have
question.
so much. We're drowning in legislation, right?
We are drowning in legislation, and the problem that I see with most criminal defense laws has to do with over-criminalization. And it's partly a matter of what you said, that we have too many laws, but we also have laws that are just way too strict. One of the things that we frequently run into in criminal defense is people getting arrested, and they're charged with a number of laws, a number of violations of laws, some of which, are a real stretch. I mean, I've been hearing in some cases lately, I haven't had one of these yet, where somebody, for example, sells drugs to another individual. That individual later overdoses, and they come back to the guy that sold them the drugs and charge him with murder.
Wow.
I'm sorry, that's a bit of a stretch. Why don't they just start charging everybody who sells a gun that's later used to kill somebody, charge them with murder? If you're the executive of a gun company, why don't they charge you with murder? If you drive...
Or if you die of a heart attack, why not charge McDonald's for all the cheeseburgers you ate?
I actually heard about somebody who tried to do that.
Really?
But I mean, for example, if you sell somebody a car, and that car is later used to kill someone, are you going to come back to the car dealer and charge them with murder? That's just crazy, you know. The drug dealer selling drugs is not intending for anybody to die.
I see.
Now, you know, that might be a natural and probable consequence of selling them drugs in some cases, but that's true of cars as well. I mean, people get killed by cars every day. So
There's a responsibility every person has for themselves that they need to be concerned about.
yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest things that irritates me. You know, I kind of bounce back and forth sometimes between being a libertarian and being a liberal in some of my views. But the fact of the matter is that we need more personal responsibility.
We've had 2 libertarians on the show so far. So.
Well, I don't know that I could technically be called a libertarian.
I see, okay.
I did blog briefly for a libertarian blog called Nobody's Business that a friend of mine had started and asked me to write for. But in the end, I stopped because I do believe in certain other liberal ideas, like, for example, that everybody should have medical insurance. So, but the bottom line, you know, to answer your question is, it's not so much that I think there are a bunch of bogus laws out there. It's that I think there are too many laws, and there's too much vagueness to a lot of them, so that they're being extended into situations where they don't apply. And that's one of the reasons I do the work that I do. You know, I have a coffee mug. I should have brought it just for kicks. That I set on my desk, and it says on it, you know, please do not confuse your Google search with my law degree. And I make sure that it's right there so that people coming in to talk to me see it. Because the thing is, with all the laws and with the fact that they do contain statements that are a little bit vague, and people read them and they say, well, that doesn't apply to me because this, but then they miss the fact that it might apply to them for some other reason. With, you know, the law degree and the training and the experience, you learn all of these things, and then you're able to get in and help see where maybe somebody really is being overcharged, or help see where somebody really does have a defense. And that's what a criminal defense lawyer is for. You know, I hear sometimes people say, well, how can you defend guilty people and put criminals out on the street? That's not what I do. I defend people who are accused of crimes. So at that particular point in time, they're not guilty. You're not guilty until or unless you're convicted, or unless you enter into some kind of a plea agreement where you admit guilt. And then after that point, you're guilty. But prior to that point, you're just accused. And that's when you need a defense lawyer.
Interesting.
Because the job of a defense lawyer is not to put criminals back on the street, but to make sure that if somebody is convicted, it's because the state proved their case.
I see.
Our job is to make them prove it, you know?
And everyone's innocent until proven guilty, or at least supposed to be, right?
That's how it's supposed to work. Now, we all know it doesn't really always work that way, but that's how it's supposed to work, and it's the job of a criminal defense attorney to try to make sure that it does work that way. So, you know, I don't look at myself as defending guilty people. In fact, you know, sometimes I defend accused people who didn't do what they're accused of. You know, true, sometimes I defend accused people who are later found guilty. But I've lost count of the number of times that I've defended people who later were, you know, found not to have done what they were accused of.
Right. Have you seen the series The Making of a Murderer?
I did
Netflix?
not. I did not see that. I've heard a lot about it.
It's a heart-wrenching experience.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyone who checks that out, you'll understand exactly what he's saying right now.
Yeah, I try to spend not too much time watching TV. They seem to get it wrong quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it hasn't helped a lot of my clients, because my clients watch TV, and you know, every day you hear you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. And then I have people come and hire me, and the first thing I find out is that they spilled their guts to the officer that was interrogating them. And sometimes they'll even say to me, well, you know, I didn't tell him anything bad. And I tell those folks, well, you know, when you're watching TV, it doesn't say you have the right to remain silent. Any bad thing you say can be used against you. It says anything. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Rick Horowitz.
You got it right. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on the show. I hope you come back sometime. There's a lot we could talk about.
We could go on forever. There are so many laws, as you pointed out.
make sure if you get locked up or arrested, get a hold of this guy right here.
And my number is at the bottom of the screen there. It looks like 559-233-8886. I also have a website, rhdefense.com. And by the way, if you go to the website, there's a link there called Testimonials where that you can click and you can see what my clients have to say about me. And it connects back to another website called avo.com so that you know I didn't just make those things up myself.
Okay. And anything you say or do can and will be held against you in the court of law. So
That's
make
right.
sure you get a hold of this attorney. Remember
Before
those
you talk.
words. Yes, before you talk, I want to speak to my lawyer. Thank you so much, Rick, for
All
coming
right.
on the show. It's been
Thank
great
you.
meeting you.
Yes.
We'll be right back.